Hello and welcome to the Exit Velo podcast. This is episode number 62, and the hot stove is staying hot. Kind of surprisingly, fellas. We didn't really think that we'd have a whole lot more baseball news to report, especially in terms of transactions, but the baseball gods have blessed us. Perhaps not if you're a Cleveland fan, but we will dive into that. We also have a little bit of sad news to discuss leading off the show tonight, but before we get into that, Adam, how are you doing? And actually, I'm sorry if I can cut you off before you say how you're doing, Adam. I want to first introduce our new member of the Exit Velo family, Matt Paolicelli. Matt joining us here tonight for his first show. So I do want to hear how both of you all are doing, but I wanted to emphasize that first, Matt. We are very happy to have you on with us tonight and excited to talk a little bit of hardball with you, man.
I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to working with the team and looking forward to talking some baseball tonight. So,
good deal. And then I guess we'll go into how you guys are doing tonight. Adam, if you want to take the lead.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I know this is really a tough week for the country and just a lot of crazy stuff happened this week, but we're here to, dive into baseball and talk about some fun news. And you really hit a nail on how Lindor trade once again shocked the baseball world. And once again, it seems like a team got fleeced. Another team really just revamped and shook up the baseball world. And Lindor is one of the best players in baseball. And Steve Cohen era has officially begun.
The Mets, man, joining the Padres is one of the few buyers in this offseason and making a huge splash with that Francisco Lindor trade. We're going to dive into that a little bit later in the show. But as we alluded to earlier, we do have a little bit of sad news to start off the show tonight, and that is that Hall of Fame manager Tommy Lasorda, a Dodgers legend, has passed. He had heart failure, and he was 93 years old, two-time World Series champion, coach for the Dodgers. Certainly lived a great life, and 93 years old, that's a long time to live. So not necessarily untimely for Tommy, but certainly definitely sad anytime you hear a baseball legend passing away. And our colleague Ben Rossi wrote an article a couple weeks back. There have been quite a few baseball legends who passed away in 2020 and now 2021 with Tommy. But I know you guys are I'm sure sad as well to hear of Tommy Lasorda's passing. If you guys just want to start the show, Adam, I'll pass off to you if you have anything to say about Tommy's legacy and what he meant to the game.
Of course, yeah. Tommy Lasorda is one of the best baseball lifers that was alive for the last 60-plus years or so, probably even more than that. And he influenced so many players. A-Rod took a lot of heart from him. So did Mike Piazza. Bobby Valentine had some posts. The entire baseball community mourned his death. And there's been so many deaths recently. There's been 8 Hall of Famers who died in 2020 and now in 2021 too. And among those names, Lou Brock, Joe Morgan, Bob Gibson, Tom Seaver, Alki Line, Whitey Ford, Phil Niekro, now, of course, Tommy Lasorda. And Lasorda, of course, was a Hall of Famer in 97, and his 22nd all-time managerial wins led the Dodgers to 2 World Series championships. He was an institution to the game of baseball, and it's very sad to see him go.
Matt, did you have any takeaways from Tommy Lasorda's passing other than, I know we're all definitely saddened to hear by it, and it's certainly unfortunate news. There's only so much you can say with anything like this, but anything you want to weigh in about Lasorda's legacy?
It's definitely sad news, Henry. I mean, the baseball world shook right now. I mean, it's tough, but if you look at, I did a little research info on his health to see if he had any pre-existing health conditions. And the whole reason he stopped being a manager was because of his heart issues, because he had a heart attack that ended his career back in I believe it was 1996. He had a heart attack, and because of the stress of the game, he decided to step away. And then he had another heart attack in 2012. And apparently a couple months ago, he was hospitalized yet again for heart issues. So it's sad, but we saw it slowly coming, and at least he was able to live a long, happy life, and at least he got to live to see the Dodgers make one more World Series run and win one,
Absolutely. That's well said, my friend. And a great note about Tommy Lasorda that he was actually able to attend the Dodgers World Series victory, Game 6 over the Tampa Bay Rays. He was there for that game. So died getting to see his Dodgers on top. And for a guy who was a lifelong Dodger, he actually played 3 years in the major leagues. He was with the Brooklyn Dodgers and was a teammate of Jackie Robinson's. So as big of a Dodger fan as any in baseball. And I know that he is smiling down on us, knowing that the Dodgers are World Series champions and that he's going to be somebody remembered for a long, long time in this game for everything that he did. Kind of known as a bit of a hothead, which I think is awesome in a manager, a guy who's fiery, who's going to get in the face of the umpires and stand up for his guys. I saw a video on Twitter shared earlier this week of him fighting the Philly Fanatic. I think that's an iconic Lasorda moment. Something else, too, I thought that was interesting is that I heard that most of his post-game presser quotes were often unusable because they were so profanity-lacing that he was a character and was a hothead and certainly a baseball legend first and foremost. So the game will very much miss Tommy Lasorda and everything that he meant, and we're thankful for his contributions to the game. But moving forward, the big hot stove news that we have to discuss, the team formerly known as the Cleveland Indians. We're not referring to them as the Indians anymore, and no team name used yet, or named yet, or rather I should say. We discussed that a few episodes back, some ideas Adam and I had. Maybe the Cleveland LeBrons might be coming sometime soon, but moving star shortstop Francisco Lindor with 1 year remaining left on his contract. Also moving Carlos Carrasco, and that was a surprise to many, especially Lindor being one of the greater players in baseball. I hear some sirens. And folks, sirens were surely going off in the baseball world when you heard that Francisco Lindor was being moved because, I mean, it's something that seems like it's been coming for a while. We've heard whispers, but Cleveland continues to get rid of their good players, surprisingly. Adam, I'm going to pass off to you and let you start to break down this trade and how surprised you may have been by it.
Well, I appreciate you talking loud enough over these sirens by me, so only in New York City, but yeah, it really shocked the baseball world, and it's pretty hilarious considering the fact that Lindor might be one of the greatest players ever to don a Cleveland Indians uniform, and almost lived and died with the Cleveland Indians as their name will no longer be in existence in 2021. And he's one of the most, he probably is still the best shortstop in the game, probably right up there with Trevor Story. So to not try to even offer him a type of long-term contract extension or even be a part of it is just a classic Indians move. And also it would be a classic Indians move to trade alongside Lindor, Carlos Carrasco as well, who has been one of the most underrated pitchers in the last 8 or so years since being traded from Philadelphia to Cleveland. And the Mets just look like a front runner in the NL East. They can definitely challenge the Braves now. And the Indians, they got a couple of pair middle infielders who can maybe be there for team control in years to come, and a couple of low-level prospects. But it certainly isn't the trade haul you're looking for.
Matt, what were your thoughts from the Francisco Lindor trade?
Well, first of all, hats off to the Mets. They're making huge moves this offseason, and I'm very interested to see how they do them, along with the Padres too. But I don't really understand what Cleveland's going for. Like, I'm not really sure what their plan was, because I feel like if they would have got who they got just trading for Lindor, they still would have got, like, the bad end of the trade. So it's like you gave away, like, a solid pitcher and, like, an all-star player pretty much for pretty much nothing, like prospects, which one of them hasn't even pitched in the MLB or minor leagues, and one of them's what you said, rookie ball, I believe, is what he's pitched. So, like, it's not really a good trade on their part, and I don't really know what they're thinking, but
yeah, I think you guys both hit the nail on the head there. It's a very Cleveland move. They've kind of become known for this over the last couple of years, and trading their star players, seemingly having no interest in retaining these guys. We saw it with Trevor Bauer 2 years ago, Corey Kluber a year ago, and now Francisco Lindor, it really head-scratching, and it makes you wonder the direction of this team. It's interesting that Cleveland did get a couple MLB-ready guys back in return in Andres Jimenez and Ahmed Rosario, but, I mean, you certainly just look at them in comparison to Carrasco and Lindor, and you're definitely Cleveland was on the short end of that stick. And as you started to mention as well, Matt, the prospects not really super high end coming back for Cleveland as well. So I didn't really love this trade for Cleveland at all. I do love it for New York. They are building a winner there. Steve Cohen is going out and being aggressive, being one of the few buyers in the market. And I mean, we're gonna talk a little bit. And you know what? We'll go ahead and talk about it now. Are they the best team in New York, Adam? As a Yankees fan, we're gonna pass it off to you here.
I think their lineup still needs a little bit of work, but hey, if they add George Springer to that lineup or even add Trevor Bauer to that rotation, I think the balance of power in New York will definitely shift. I think the Yankees still have a little bit of edge in the lineup now, of course, and they also maybe have a little bit of edge in the bullpen. So it's very close, though. I would not rule them out. The Mets obviously have a far better rotation. I would even go to argue that Jacob deGrom is a better pitcher than Garrett Cole, which was a huge debate entering 2020, and they're still very close. But deGrom probably gets a slight nod, being a two-time Cy Young Award winner and almost winning it back in 2020 as well.
Matt, you're also a New York guy and a Yankees fan, if my memory serves me correctly. Are you, like Adam, willing to give so much credit to the Mets? Which, granted, I do think is probably due credit.
I mean, I agree with Adam, honestly. The Mets, they've made so many big moves this offseason. If they go after Springer, like Adam said, their offense will be unstoppable. If they could throw Bauer on there, like, they already – again, their pitching staff is already, like, set. So if they could add a Cy Young winner like Bauer on there, they'll be unstoppable.
And it kind of makes me wonder, too, why there aren't more teams going out and trying to trade for Yu Darvishes or Francisco Lindors, and why there aren't more teams in the market for George Springers and Trevor Bauers. And I know the easy answer is the financial situation of the game and how COVID impacted that as well. But I mean, it almost seems like teams like the Padres and the Mets are, when nobody else is trying to get these guys, you're really setting yourselves up for success. And it's just surprising to me to see more teams not taking that approach as well.
Well, I think that's partly because the players are asking for so much. George Springer wants $175 million. Bauer wants $40+ million a year. And JT Realmuto wants $200 million as well. Those are very high asking prices for all three of those players. Then when you add LeMahieu to Mets, wanting $125 million as well, and it's easy to see why teams are a bit relentant or kind of almost playing the waiting game, like we've seen in recent years, where they're probably going to wait it out until February until we see these big free agents come off the board. But Henry, I like your point that you mentioned and how teams are getting fleeced by these trades, in the Blake Snell trade, in the Yu Darvish trade, and now in the Lindor Carrasco trade. Every team is being fleeced. They're not getting great hauls in return. Granted, the Indians did get a pair of middle infielders who will be under team control for several years and will at least be some average starting players at the very least. So it's not a bad haul for them, but at least the prospects, they should have been MLB ready or should have been highly touted, but they're not.
So why? I don't understand it, though. Like, why are these teams willing to get fleeced? Like, why are you giving up Yu Darvish and Lindor? I mean, Lindor, I get it a little bit more with 1 year left on his contract, but you had 3 years left of Darvish. You had, I think, 3 years left of Snell as well. It's just the trade market is in a very, very weird place right now, and I just don't get it. Like, what the heck is Cleveland thinking? And I want to dig into that a little bit more, Matt, and kind of just the moves that have happened over the years that, you know, trading Trevor Bauer, trading Corey Kluber, trading Francisco Lindor. And I know Cleveland's not a huge market. They're not mega spenders like the Yankees or how the Cubs have been at times, that they are a little bit more fiscally responsible, but they're not the Tampa Bay Rays and one of the lower budgets in the league. Why are you going out and consistently getting rid of your good players?
Now, that's a really good question, Henry. I don't really understand either, considering, like you said, they don't have a super low salary cap. Like, they may not have, like, a high budget like the New York Yankees, but they're certainly not at the bottom of the barrel. And it's not only, like, you're not bidding down for free agents, you're also letting go your top talents. Like you said, Bauer was a really good pitcher for them. They just let him go. They let go Clubber. They let go Lindor. They're just letting go all their talents, and it doesn't really seem like they have a rebuilding plan. So I don't really understand what their game is, but
it's confusing, man. And it's in a division too that, I mean, maybe you look at it in the context of the AL Central and that nobody really seems to want to be competitive in that division other than the White Sox. I will give them that. I think they're building a winner there. But, I mean, Minnesota's not really doing much. And, I mean, Detroit is slowly building their way back up. They went and got A.J. Hinch, but Kansas City's not going to be very good. And even with the White Sox, it's not like they're going out and making mega free agent deals. They've kind of built that organically, that there's no real huge buyer in the AL Central. And it's a weird context, and I think it's a weird environment all over baseball. But Adam, I saw in some of the pre-show notes, you seem to be a little bit more optimistic about Cleveland's lineup. Do you think they could still have a chance to compete in that Central in 2021?
Well, it certainly depends on the playoff format, and I know that's been a recurring topic I've brought up in recent shows, but it's super important because if there's only 5 teams each per league, I don't think the Indians are a playoff team, because I think a wild card team could be the Yankees or Rays or the Twins or White Sox or the Astros or A's, whoever are the victors and losers of those divisions respectively, and maybe even a team like the Angels can pop out of nowhere and surprise some people, or even the Blue Jays. So I don't see the Indians making the playoffs just yet. If there's only 5 teams, if there's 8 teams per league, then sure, because there's almost no one else besides that. But I think their lineup's a bit underrated, because I think Jimenez and Rosario both offer some nice speed and power. They don't have too much power, but they can still maybe 20 bases per year. They have someone like Oscar Mercado, who was also like about a 15-15 player a couple of years ago. They have Jake Bowers, who has power. Bradley Zimmer's a good defender in the outfield and also can steal 20 bases. So I don't think they have as much star power as they once had. They don't have Carlos Santana. They don't have Lindor. Ramirez will probably leave in a couple of years, almost certainly. So it's not a lot of high-brand names, and even the bullpen isn't what it once was. No 2016 Indians bullpen. The starting rotation after Bieber, while they're impressive young group, they're not really brand-name stars. So they still have a chance. I think the Indians are kind of with the Rays and how they surprise some people and still remains competitive, but they're not going to win the World Series in 2021, that's for sure.
Certainly not World Series contender in 2021, but I do appreciate your perspective. I think that there are still some good players there. They do have pieces and perhaps long-term guys there too, and youth that can develop into something greater, even if they're not necessarily household names right now. And another great point by you too, Adam, that Shane Bieber is still there, and that rotation isn't bad. You still have Zach Plesac, a guy who's shown flashes, and I believe Tristan McKenzie. I know his last name is McKenzie. I think it's Tristan is his first name, is a young starting pitcher with some promise for them as well. As we were kind of starting to talk about their rotation, I remembered that they also traded Mike Clevenger last year. Another example to add to the Cleveland selling argument. But Matt, do you share Adam's optimism that Cleveland could be competitive in 2021? Not to misrepresent Adam's argument. Adam said that they're not a playoff team, but that there is still some promise in that lineup. Is that something that you believe as well, Matt?
Well, the Cleveland baseball team definitely has some potential. Almost just slipped up there and said the other name, but they definitely have potential. They're just moving in the wrong direction with the moves they're making. Instead of going after big names and signing big players, they're giving away players and hurting the strength of their team, because they have a bunch of guys who could play solid. They have a bunch of solid players, but they're not making that big step. They're not signing that big player who's really going to give the lineup pop. They're not adding that big starter who's really going to take them all the way. And I don't think they're going to make the playoffs either this year. I don't think they're going to be a very good team for at least the next 2 seasons, unless they make some drastic moves.
And it does appear that they're kind of nearing a rebuilding phase, certainly a retooling phase at this point, but perhaps with an expanded playoffs, as Adam alluded to, they could turn some heads. But I want to take a second to move into kind of the other side of this trade, talk a little bit more about the Mets' implications. And how awesome that team and that lineup is starting to look, especially when you add Francisco Lindor. I mean, you already have Pete Alonso in the year he had 2 years ago. I know he took a little bit of a step back in 2020, but it was a weird year. I think everybody kind of gets a pass. But you have Dom Smith out there in the outfield. You have J.D. Davis showing some promise with the bat. You still got Michael Conforto, Brandon Nimmo. I haven't even mentioned Jeff McNeil. They went out and signed McCann to play catcher for them. That's suddenly one of the stronger lineups in baseball. And, oh, yeah, you still have Jacob deGrom, Marcus Stroman. You got Thor coming back this year. How awesome are the Mets about to be in 2021, Adam? And are they better than the Braves?
Well, I think the Mets really could win the division in 2021. I think even their bullpen is a bit underrated because Edwin Diaz, even though he's struggled at times over the past couple of years, he can still be a dominant closer. You have Dylan Betances, who will get a full-fledged year in 2021. They added Trevor May and Miguel Castro, and they also might have Seth Lugo at times in the pen if he's not starting. So the Mets look awfully good, and their lineup is 1 through 8. They have a great hitter at each position, probably even above average hitter at each position. Then starting pitching wise, they have Mass and Peterson at the back end of the rotation. That's still a respectable 4 and 5 starter. So they look like a very talented team. And I think just comparing them to the Braves, I think the lineup's close to a toss-up. I think even the start rotation's close to a toss-up. I think the Mets bullpen is a lot better than the Braves at this point because they lost guys like Mark Melancon and Shane Green in free agency. And the projected reliever right now is, or closer rather, is Chris Martin, which isn't that great. He isn't one of the more dominant relievers in the game, and there's not too many guys after him. So I think the Mets have an edge right now.
And it was already kind of a struggling bullpen for the Braves as well. And you lose 2 of your top guys, and it was already a weak bullpen. So I love that point as well, Adam. I think the Mets definitely a strength there in the bullpen. Matt, what's your opinion on how those Mets compare to the Braves?
I think the Mets are going to do better than the Braves this year, personally, just because their rotations are pretty close, starting rotation-wise. I think the Mets have a slight edge. And like Adam said, the bullpen, it's a lot better, obviously. And I don't know, I just think the Mets all around are going to do better than the Braves this year. And I think the Mets are going to be one of the top teams, and potentially they could even be making a World Series run if they make 1 or 2 big more moves. Like if they sign Bauer and throw him in the rotation, like they're going to have the best, well, them between the Padres, they'll have the best rotations in baseball right now. If they sign Springer, that's going to give them that extra bat on the offense that makes them unbeatable.
That's another great point there, too, that the Mets probably aren't done. They still have room in the budget to go out and get a George Springer or a Trevor Bauer. And if you had either one of those guys, and I mean, there's actually trade rumors coming in today as well that Chris Bryant, my beloved Cub, could be on his way to the Mets. And I don't want to suggest that he, at this point, is as big of a difference maker as either George Springer or Trevor Bauer. But the point is the Mets aren't done buying. They're going to continue to improve this team. And I think the Steve Cohen effect is real, man. It's crazy. The culture has changed so quickly in New York. And all of a sudden, man, the 3 best teams in baseball very well could be in the NL. Certainly, I believe the Yankees and the Rays are probably deserving to still be in that conversation. But when you look at what the Padres and the Mets have done this offseason, and then the Dodgers still very strong, am I crazy to say the best 3 teams in baseball may be Padres, Mets, Dodgers?
I would change the order a little bit. I think it could be Dodgers, Padres, Mets in terms of rankings, but I think there's certainly a case to be made. I think all those, or at least the Padres and Mets, rather, they both have been buyers this offseason when no one's buying right now. I mean, we could have some late additions. Maybe some more teams will try to go for these fleecing trades and lopsided trades. But Mets reign supreme right now, and it's so significant that they're adding all this money to the budget because they, like the Indians, like the Rays, they acted like a small market team for so much of their history, even though they are based in New York City, which is a great market. So to finally see them spend money like they should, have the richest owner in baseball, it's really nice to see, even from a Yankee fan's perspective. It's good to see both teams be competitive.
I would agree with you certainly, Adam, that I think it is good for baseball to see the Mets, taking this leap and getting back to some of their former glory, and how awesome the Subway Series will be this year, seeing both of those teams competitive and among the very best teams in baseball. Matt, I know we've covered the Mets trade here pretty extensively. Do you have any more thoughts to weigh in with before we move on?
I mean, you guys pretty much covered everything. It's just it's refreshing to see teams actually doing something right now compared to just sitting wait like what's happening with baseball. We check the news every day, nothing's happening. So it's nice to see some teams are taking advantage of this time to really rebuild and set a good starting rotation, a good lineup, and get ready for the season.
Absolutely. It's encouraging, too, to see the hot stove not as cold as we thought it would be, that there's actually some baseball moves happening and rumors still happening, too. So maybe the whole transaction landscape isn't quite as bleak as we imagined it may be. But that's a transition to something that is a little bit more bleak and some concerning news coming out that several of the game's top pitchers have been named in a scandal involving illegal ball doctoring substances. That's Garrett Cole, Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer, Adam Wainwright, Corey Kluber, and Felix Hernandez being named among several pitchers in a lawsuit by former Angels clubhouse manager Brian Bubba Hawkins. And Hawkins was dismissed in March following an MLB investigation that found that he was helping Angels pitchers doctor balls, and kind of a strange wrinkle in this that he was helping all these visitor pitchers doctor balls as well. So we talked a little bit pre-show. It's kind of weird to see somebody cheating not only to give your own team an advantage, but to give everybody an advantage. Still a lot of details coming together on this story, and certainly these pitchers are presumed innocent until proven guilty. So we don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, but pretty huge news here, Adam. And what were your thoughts hearing this story break yesterday?
I honestly wasn't too surprised. If it's not illegal, human nature tells us, and baseball players have told us in the past that they're going to do everything they can to have an edge over their peers. So I'm not surprised by this. I actually don't think it's as big of news as we're thinking it, because if they're going to go out and prosecute all these players, they're going to have to prosecute everyone in baseball, because everyone has their own edge. I'm sure all pitchers try to use some type of substance to an extent on trying to help their pitching. As I feel like this is kind of like the Astros scandal almost all over again, that where if you're going to, maybe you'll just take out the clubhouse manager and a couple other guys, Jeff Lunhow and AJ Hinch, but really it's the players who are behind this cause. It's players who are going out and trying to give themselves the advantage. But if Rob Manfred were to slap down on everyone, that would just be bad for the game. So I think it's still going to happen. I think players would still doctor the ball, and it makes sense why all these pitchers probably rose to stardom. And you look at Garrett Cole and Verlander, who had their careers change significantly with the Astros and change all their spin rates. It makes a lot of sense how this could be the proof in the pudding.
I think you make a great point there, Adam, that, cheating is, sadly, it's very much a part of the game. It's ingrained in the spirit of baseball, whether it's PEDs or doctoring balls or stealing signs, that players are always trying to get an advantage, and there's no way we can completely eliminate that. It is kind of disheartening, though, to see these guys who are the very top of the pitching market, or not the pitching market, just the pitching game, and Garrett Cole, Verlander, Scherzer, to perhaps have their legacy tainted a little bit, that maybe they're not as naturally great as we otherwise would have believed, which isn't to say that they aren't naturally great. Maybe this is just a little cherry on top, but I don't know. It's concerning to me to see the cheating, but I want to pass it off to Matt here. And Matt, what are your thoughts kind of on this breaking scandal?
I mean, I'm not surprised personally, but I am very disappointed. I mean, you see it all throughout baseball throughout the years. Every time pitchers, especially pitchers with gripping the baseball, I don't know if y'all remember when Michael Pineda put the pine tar on the side of his neck on the mound, and he thought he could get away with dipping onto his neck in the middle of the game. It's not an uncommon thing. People do it all the time, and I guess you do have to try to get an edge, but I don't like it because it sends the wrong message to children and baseball fans, because you grow up watching baseball and you admire these dudes, you worship them, and you think they're the best people in the whole wide world, and then you find out about PEDs, you find out that they're cheating, and it just kind of crushes your spirit. Like, if they can't do it the right way, how can I do it the right way? And it sends the wrong message.
It is disheartening to the future of the game, especially the game that is having such marketing issues right now and trying to build favor with the younger base to, have scandals like this. It's not a good look, and it kind of takes away from some of the purity of baseball and just the love for the game and playing it the right way. So certainly disheartening. But there could be more names coming out in this. Like Adam was mentioning, this is pretty widespread. I suspect everybody is at least trying to gain some kind of competitive advantage, whether it's through pine tar or some other kind of substance, and certainly not only pitchers as well. But I was thinking maybe Trevor Bauer could be a domino affected by this as well. I am no secret that I am a Trevor Bauer hater, and that is in no small part because I'm a Yu Darvish lover, and I thought he should have been the 2020 NL Cy Young. But it's worth noting that Trevor Bauer's spin rate rose quite a bit in this 2020 season from what he had previously been at. I believe it was by more than 300 RPM. And Bauer famously called out Garrett Cole for a similar jump in his fastball spin rate a couple of years ago. Bauer actually took to Twitter and did a victory lap of sorts upon this news breaking, saying, see, I told you so, that Cole was a cheater, essentially. I don't know if Bauer's necessarily out of the woods yet, and kind of weird to see him weighing in while so many dollars are on the line for Trevor Bauer.
It is a little weird to see. I really don't think it will affect his market that much. I still think he might be the richest pitcher ever in baseball history by an average annual value standpoint by the end of the season. Very well could happen. And he's Trevor Bauer. He, like him or hate him, he's going to take Twitter by storm and provide entertainment for the fans. And you can't really hate him for that because he's just hilarious. But he is shooting himself in the foot right here because, as Henry alluded to, he also had a lot more vertical movement on his slider and his curveball and his fastball in 2020. And he's part of the grilling movement. But he also went to driveline baseball, where their big thing is kind of hacking into these pitchers' repertoire and their mechanics and trying to get the most bang for their buck. So perhaps Bauer has a little bit more justification than other pitchers like Verlander and Cole and the Astros suddenly becoming World Series contenders, but it's not a good look on him.
And that's a good point there too, Adam, that Bauer does seem to have more of a leg to stand on, and that he has certainly embraced the analytics movement, kind of driveline baseball, trying to really break down pitching, get technical with it. And it is possible for guys to improve their spin rates in other ways other than cheating. So I should probably be a little less gung-ho in accusing Trevor Bauer of things that I have no proof for. And, I mean, maybe if Trevor Bauer was doctoring the ball, then he would have been named in this report as well, which he was not. So that's certainly credit to Trevor Bauer, too. And I do think he will certainly end up becoming a very, very rich man in this offseason. Matt, so we know on the pod that I don't like Trevor Bauer. Adam does like Trevor Bauer. What are your thoughts on Mr. Bauer?
So I am actually a big Trevor Bauer fan. I know it's not the popular opinion, but I love the kind of player he is. I like the crazy stuff he does, like how he crow hops behind the mound before games, how he has a tendency like long toss, foul pole to foul pole. I like his mentality. I like the edge he brings, and I like his intensity personally. But
I can't argue with any of those things. That I do think his brand is good for the game. He's an exciting guy. His personality kind of rubs me the wrong way. And I think that, maybe that's just that he is a big personality and it's not for everybody. But no, I totally get the appeal, and he is a great player. So I'm not going to hate on anybody for liking Trevor Bauer, but it's more power to you. And I'm also salty about the 2020 NL Cy Young. I'll be the first one to admit that as well. But I think that is most of. Actually, I do have one more point I want to bring up on this too. That kind of interesting. Among these pitchers named in this report, you see Verlander, Scherzer, Wainwright, Kluber, and Hernandez. That it seems like a lot of veteran pitchers maybe trying to hang on to some former glory by doing whatever they can. And, if that's doctoring the ball, then I don't know. I just thought that was an interesting wrinkle to it as well, that maybe that's how pitchers are getting a little bit of longevity. Do you think doctoring balls is more of a veteran problem, or is this more widespread than I may be suggesting?
Well, these are obviously the big names. There could be hundreds of smaller pitchers, of less known pitchers who could have doctored baseballs as well. And I think it's a little weird to use Kluber and Hernandez as an example, just because Hernandez didn't have a second half career resurgence, and Kluber did so, but that was around 7 or 8 years ago. So maybe the timeline's a little bit iffy, and it just came out now, but maybe Kluber did this a while ago and has continued to do so. I don't know if it's really happened as of late. And even Scherzer made a big jump from the Diamondbacks to the Tigers. So we have no idea when this occurred, how long it's been occurring. And I don't deny that a lot of pitchers could still be doing this.
I appreciate you reeling me in there too, that if Felix Hernandez was cheating, he should maybe cheat a little bit harder, because those numbers were still pretty ugly. Matt, do you have any suspicion that we need to really look at the veterans and trying to extend their careers?
Well, I mean, I think everyone does it at some point. They use some. I feel like every pitcher, especially like you see crappy weather conditions, like stuff's not going right. Like you can't, I pitched in college, and if you've ever pitched in terrible weather, there's no way you're throwing strikes. Like I've hit most of my batters in my career because of garbage weather, and I've not been able to grip a baseball. So it's just something, it's part of the game. Like most guys will try to get some dirt on their hand or try to do something just to grip it. But again, spin rate can increase velocity and movement. If you could spin a baseball tighter, you could get more movement, you could get more speed. Because if you go back and look at all the old pitchers like Nolan Ryan, Billy Wagner, all those guys, if you watch YouTube videos, all they'll talk about is they try to spin the baseball as tight and as hard as they can. And that was their number one goal. And they didn't have the technology back in the day to back it up, but now they do, and it's actually proven. So if you're cheating and other people aren't, like I feel like if you've noticed, spin rates have gone up in the MLB like dramatically in the last couple of years. So I feel like everybody's doing something, regardless of the technology. I feel like everybody's cheating in their own way.
I wouldn't argue with that at all, and I would say analytics may be playing a little bit of role in that, but as we kind of saw with the Astros, there is a fine line between analytics and going too far and crossing a line, and what is right, what is wrong. But I love, Matt, that you brought up how the conditions can kind of impact that as well, and the necessity for it. I remember pitching in a game in high school, man. It was about 30 degrees. It was March, very beginning of the season. I couldn't throw a strike to save my life, and my coach comes out and tells me to go ahead and try and drill a batter for the opposite team. They had like hit a home run and done something annoying or whatever. And I was trying to throw at this guy, and then I threw it right down the middle for the first strike I've thrown in like several batters. I can attest to that as well. And I saw another interesting tweet on this as well, that if you completely crack down on all these substances and everything, that it'd be really hard for pitchers to grip the ball, especially with conditions that are adverse to pitching. And we may see, hit batters and walks, things like that skyrocket. So maybe it helps a little bit in the quality of play, having a little bit of cheating, as weird as that may sound. But great point, and I appreciate you bringing that as well from a player's perspective.
No problem, man. It's definitely tough. Like when the mound's a mush underneath your feet and you're trying to stride out and you're like on ice skates trying to throw a strike and you can't even grip the baseball, like you'd be stupid not to try to cheat. Like I there's been plenty of times where I've dunked my hand in some dirt and tried to get some dirt on the ball just to give it some texture, just so I could hang on to it. And I know people are doing it to actual cheat, but I wasn't doing it for that fact. I just wanted to throw a strike so I didn't get pulled out of the game. Like I want to stay on the mound. So it just kind of, again, like you said, some people go too far, and there's a certain extent where you do have to draw the line, but sometimes you have to do what you have to do to compete in like poor weather conditions. So
it's tough too, and it's hard to say what is acceptable. There's a lot of unwritten rules in baseball, and it's just I don't have the answer. I know we don't on this podcast, and it'll be interesting to see how this goes moving forward. And still, like I said, a lot of details yet to emerge, and see who is guilty of this and who is not. But something we had to cover on the show tonight. But Moving forward, some more transaction news. The hot stove staying hot a little bit elsewhere other than Francisco Lindor. Most notable move, I would say, since our last show was Blake Trinan signing a 2-year, $17.5 million deal to remain with the Dodgers. Adam, this was something that we discussed a little bit, and saying Liam Hendriks is another candidate who still may well join that Dodgers bullpen, but the bullpen was kind of the main chink in the armor for the Dodgers that we had identified. And how impactful, rather, is this move to making the Dodgers able to repeat their 2020 World Series?
Well, I think Blake Trinan certainly helps. He was one of the best arms in the bullpen for the Dodgers, especially when Kenley Jansen was really being unreliable towards the end of the season. So re-sign a guy who just a couple years back posted a 3.6 F4, which is really unheard of for relievers. Usually if you only have one WAR or so, that's very good for a reliever, but this guy was top of the pack in terms of relievers just a couple years ago, so he'll be a nice deal for them. And this is certainly not the end of moves for the Dodgers. They're probably going to add Hendricks and perhaps try to go after LeMahieu or even keep Turner in LA. They got to answer somehow to the Padres, and this was not the biggest move, but it was a nice start to just keep Trinan remaining in LA.
And when you are a World Series champion, you don't necessarily have to go out and sign your Trevor Bauers or your George Springers or trade for Francisco Lindors. It can be mostly keeping that core intact, which bringing back Justin Turner would be another huge part of that as well. Matt, do you think the Dodgers are still the team to beat in the NL West? And how much does that Blake Trinan signing impact your opinion on that?
I think they're still the team to beat, yes, but I feel like I kind of agree with what you were saying earlier, how I agree with they need to stick to the core team that brought them to the World Series. Like they don't need, like you said, Adam, they don't need to sign the big stars. They don't need to go after those guys. They need to keep the core that got them there together. Make sure they don't lose anyone too important and make small changes. So like you guys said, the bullpen, re-signing Blake was a really good move because you're keeping your bullpen strong. Now you could go out and get another solid bullpen pitcher and slowly add to the little weaknesses you had last season. And then there you go. You make another World Series. Instead of changing everything, you don't start from scratch when you already won. Like you try to keep going what you have going as long as you can. Then you restart if everything else fails.
I absolutely agree with that as well. I mean, I think even if the Dodgers don't get Liam Hendriks, you don't bring Justin Turner back, you keep that roster exactly how it is at this moment. I mean, they're still a slam dunk playoff team. I would say that and if you expand the playoffs, it's even more so. They go from like a 98% probability to 99.9 if you expand the playoffs. And you don't necessarily have to be decisively better than the Padres to for sure be a wild card team at the very least. And the Dodgers are going to be a playoff team for a very, very long time, I suspect, as annoying as it may be to kind of see them there again and again. But the Padres at least starting to push them a little bit in the NL West. But another couple moves coming in across the league. I was excited to see my guy Kyle Schwarber getting a deal with the Nationals today. 1 year, $10 million contract. He also has, I believe, an $11 million option for 2022 if he's able to bounce back. I know he had a kind of tough 2020 season, but hey, man, it's COVID. It's a shortened season, small sample size. So I don't think we're making any sweeping assumptions based on that year. I thought this could be a semi-upside signing for the Nationals and not a huge price tag. Were you all equally as impressed, or am I just a Kyle Schwarber homer?
No, I think this is – well, I love the Kyle Schwarber homer. That's a good unintentional pun right there. But I think the Nationals doing a great job adding powerful lefty bats. They already have Juan Soto. They added Josh Bell a couple weeks ago, and now they have Schwarber in that mix too. So slowly the Nationals are starting to rebuild their offense, and they already have a great rotation as well, the three-headed dragon and Corbin, Scherzer, and Strasburg. So this is a perfect move for the Nationals. Have a little bit of money to spend, and they got Schwarber, and he's never a good bounce-back candidate.
And that lineup starting to look a little bit better. I know we were concerned when Anthony Rendon left town, but certainly, Adam, like you said, adding Josh Bell helps a lot. Still have Juan Soto. Carter Keyboom, a prospect coming up who can hopefully make a difference for them, whether it be at second base perhaps or maybe not slotting to the outfield now that you add Schwarber, because you still got Victor Robles out there in center field as well. But certainly a stronger lineup, more protection, I should say, for Juan Soto. And, I mean, it's going to be a tough division to be competitive in with how good the Mets and the Braves are already going to be, but the Nationals moving in the right direction. I don't want to cut you off, Matt. Any big takeaways from the Schwarber signing?
I mean, like you said, I know he didn't really have the best season, but it's really hard to judge a hitter when the season's as short as it was, because some hitters start off slow, and with COVID, there wasn't really room for error as a batter. If you had a little slow stretch in the beginning, your average took a pretty tough fall. So it's hard to judge, and I think the Nats, I think they made a good move by signing him, and they're continuing to add to their lineup, like Adam said, and again, they just got to keep adding and keep rebuilding.
Possibly a dark horse NL East contender, and perhaps a wild card contender at the very least. But a couple of other transactions of note happening over the last week. The Astros signing relief pitcher Ryan Stanek to a 1-year, $1.1 million deal. Don't forget about the Astros, guys. They still have some talent there, and maybe George Springer might be leaving town, but hell, maybe heck, sorry, I don't know if we say hell, or if we say that word on the podcast, pardon me. Maybe Justin Verlander suspension or something coming, but certainly still some talent in Houston, and adding to that bullpen as well. Never hurts to see a guy like Ryan Stanek. We're probably not going to spend too much time talking about that. I know it's not an earth-shattering deal, but any impressions of that deal and the directions of the Astros, Adam?
Well, I just love Ryan Stanek because he was one of the first openers in Rays history, and that's one of the first openers in baseball history. He came over from the Marlins and Nick Anderson trade, which has proved very useful for Tampa Bay. And he's a quality reliever, just a couple of years removed from being one of the best relievers in baseball. So I think it's a nice low-cost signing for the Astros. And another move that happened recently is Kurt Casale signed a 1-year, $1.5 million deal with the Giants, adding a little depth there as Posey's getting up there in age and perhaps stalling a little bit for Joey Bart. Posey's going to probably leave San Francisco in the next couple of years or so, or maybe make the transition to first base. So a nice low-budget move for San Francisco as well.
I'm interested to see what San Francisco does over the next couple of years. They're kind of in a funny spot, too. They seem to be rebuilding-ish or retooling, kind of in the direction my Cubs look like they're heading. But both big market teams that, seem like sleeping giants capable of coming back quicker than perhaps other rebuilding teams. So interesting to see what San Francisco does there. And Matt, any closing thoughts on any of those transactions coming in over this last week?
I mean, I feel like you and Adam pretty much hit everything there, but it's really interesting to see all these 1-year contract signings compared to a couple of years ago. We were signing big contract. Like, remember when Bryce Harper got signed for all those years? And now we're seeing, you could tell financially the MLB might be struggling a little bit because we're only doing 1-year contracts. We're not signing players as long, and it's just interesting to see.
Yeah, the finances of the game are in a weird spot right now. All the owners are claiming, and I'm sure they did lose a lot of money in 2020. Maybe it's a little bit overblown than what they're claiming. Maybe they're playing that up a little bit. It's hard to feel bad for those billionaire owners, but certainly, I mean, I feel bad for the players that are getting these 1-year deals, not getting that long-term security, and not getting huge Bryce Harper level contracts. The finances of the game are in a weird spot, and it seems like the players are definitely hurting from it. And it's only probably going to get uglier, unfortunately, with the CBA expiring after the 2021 season. I know there's an ugly financial fight on the way. Adam, are you any more optimistic about it than I am?
Well, I certainly think the finances are really hurting MLB as it is for the rest of the country and even the rest of the world. But I also wonder if teams are trying to become more smart, trying to rely more on their young core and not hand out big contracts. For example, Trevor Bauer might command a $200+ billion contract, but he's really had 2 elite seasons. Not that he hasn't been an impressive pitcher nonetheless. Or George Springer's been injury prone, so maybe you don't want to sign him to a $200 million deal. Or JT Realmuto is going to be 30 in a year, so maybe you don't want to sign him to a long-term contract. So I think teams are just trying to avoid that in general as well. And that might be one of the reasons why they're trying to sign them to shorter deals.
That's a good point, too. Free agency in itself has kind of been exposed as the least efficient way to add talent, where you have to spend so much to bring in these impact guys. Where is it really worth it to drop $200+ million on a Trevor Bauer rather than have 5 different $10 million pitchers, and some of them are going to end up panning out and some of them aren't. So the game is moving kind of more in that direction of young talent. Certainly let the kids play, which there's positives and negatives to that. Guys like Trevor Bauer are going to end up getting paid one way or another, but the market for them has certainly narrowed. And, we only hear about another 2 or 3 teams in the market for him, which is interesting to hear in comparison to where we were a decade ago in the game, where you would have had 15+ teams lining up to add a Trevor Bauer-like talent. But something to keep an eye on moving forward, and hopefully we'll have a little bit more on Trevor Bauer. He's going to be mentioned on pretty much every show that we have until he's signed and maybe until the season starts. But we'll continue bringing you that news, and thank you all for tuning in tonight to the Exit Velo podcast. I want to thank our viewers tonight, especially. I've noticed we have more guys and gals tuning into the live stream than we normally do. It seems like we got a good audience tonight, so thank you all for joining us. And Matt, we're certainly happy to have you on tonight for your first episode with the team, and looking forward to many more great ones in the future.
I had a good time with you guys. It was good talking some baseball tonight.
All right. Well, we'll be back next Saturday for Exit Velo 63. Moving forward, onwards to episode number 100. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Have a great rest of your weekend. And until next time, this is the Exit Velo podcast from BackSportsPage.